Hi, this is Nasco again, and welcome back to the Great Reset. Today, we're going to talk about Starlink, how it's going to affect us in the coming decade. First, I'm going to talk about what Starlink is today. It currently is a constellation of almost 1,000 satellites. And if you live in certain northern regions of the world, like northern USA, Canada, and other countries coming very soon, like Greece, Australia, you can get internet service for $99 a month with a $500 payment to get the satellite dish required to receive the signal. This is an extremely fast growing service, meaning that for 2021, SpaceX has scheduled a Starlink launch of satellites once every 2 weeks. The latest estimated cost of a Starlink launch was back in 2019, which probably means it's already too expensive, at $30 million per launch, and the satellites cost about $250,000 each. On each launch, there is 60 satellites. What that means, currently, a launch was estimated to cost about $45 million for each 60 satellites. A launch right now is about half that. 20 to 25 million per launch. The last time SpaceX sent to the constellation, it was on a Falcon 9 used for the 7th time, the most used rocket in the world. So what we know so far is that this system is rapidly expanding and it's global. What we'll see in the next 2 to 3 years will be the first global internet company in the world, which will compete with a whole bunch of small national companies, and it will eat their lunch. The initial stated goal is for Starlink to be internet for the rural communities, because it wouldn't be able to handle all the traffic that would come from offering service everywhere. This is highly misleading. Elon Musk once again is sandbagging the true goal of Starlink. The reason why current satellites might not be able to handle all of the traffic supported is because he knows that currently he's launching satellites of the version 1.0. I'm 100% sure that they're working on version 1.2, 1.3, 2.0, 2.3, which will be able to handle much more traffic, much more traffic. So in the immediate future, Starlink will be offered only in rural areas, but this will change rapidly. Probably within 2 to 3 years, we'll start getting service anywhere we want. The reason why it will have huge market share is because it will be more reliable than what you have from cable, and it will be cheaper than what you have from cable. If you know anything with Elon Musk companies, their starting prices are the highest, and they start going down from there. Once Starship, which is the next version, or the next big rocket ship that SpaceX is building, becomes operational, their stated goal is for a launch to cost $2 million, compared with about $20 million now for a used Falcon 9. So with a $2 million launch and a dropping price of satellites, which are currently estimated to be $250,000, let's say it drops down by half within the next 2 to 3 years due to scale of manufacturing, natural improvements that they would have learned from the current launches, a launch could be about $10 million. In the internet operator space, this is nothing. There is already noises made from Russia and Europe that SpaceX is becoming a monopoly, even though it's a less than 20-year-old space company. It's beating everyone else, and it's beating them with quality and price at the same time. For many other reasons, SpaceX is just kicking their asses. So in the next 2 to 3 years, there is not a viable competitor to SpaceX. Looking out 5 years, there might be a competitor. It will be highly subsidized by someone's taxpayers, the European taxpayers, the American taxpayers, the Russian taxpayers, the Chinese taxpayers. Regardless, it will be a highly subsidized copy what SpaceX is doing, and start having reusable rockets and to build a constellation of satellites that would compete with SpaceX's. This does not mean that SpaceX will lose. It just means it will be competing against a slower, more than likely bureaucratic competitor that will never be able to catch them. It will just be always the plan B. It will be better than what we have today outside of SpaceX, but way worse than SpaceX. So if you look, let's say, right now we're in 2021. At the end of 2024, starting of 2025, I expect SpaceX to have about 10% of the global internet market. That sounds like a lot, but it's not. Already, a survey in the United States has shown that 50% of Americans are ready to switch to Starlink. For one, the current internet providers have the worst, and I mean the worst, customer service ever recorded in the United States. The prices are always with a whole bunch of hidden fees. They raise the prices regularly. Starlink, you have a company that has dropping costs all the time, where the equipment you have is basically pointed at the sky and it works. So having a company that doesn't need customer service is much better than a company with shitty customer service, which is what their competition is. Their competition cannot compete with SpaceX on cost, especially on a cost where their cost keeps going up. The next iteration of Starlink after that, or even maybe while this is happening, will be a private Starlink. I am willing to bet anybody that by 2025, we're going to be hearing about a contract offered to SpaceX by the American government. What I mean is whether it's the State Department or the US military, the Pentagon, they will want to have their own private Starlink. The reason is that's what the US military uses right now. They use satellite equipment that was developed in the 60s, adopted to work now, but it's basically expensive. It breaks, it's unreliable, it's hard to move, it's not fast. Not that the US military doesn't have good satellites or good intelligence or good connections. It's the fact that they have to work with equipment that was designed for internet that's in the $500 million per launch price window, and they will be able to buy their SpaceX Starlink for the US military at the $5 million per launch. It will be huge savings for them from maintenance standpoint, from maneuverability standpoint, from speed of communication standpoint. It will be a no-brainer. Now, we should point out the US military has 800 bases around the world, basically everywhere. The US military has a base in Alaska. And at the same time, the State Department has embassies all over the world. Those embassies are all spending crazy money for their own data protection. The government where the embassy is based on, to anyone else who's trying to hack the information that they're transmitting. Just those two departments would pay triple the price of what SpaceX would be offering their service in at that point of time to have their own Starlink. Private, without any intermediaries, without any worry of their signal being intercepted. It will be a no-brainer. It will, like I said, I'm betting anybody that within 2025 we'll be hearing about a contract like that. So what does this mean for, let's say, 10 years down the road for SpaceX? There is one big problem that we need to discuss, and that big problem is China. If the SpaceX terminals start finding their way into Chinese citizens, the great internet wall of China becomes obsolete. It's like if you invented an airplane while they're building a wall. It makes no sense. You have no intermediary between your laptop or your computer or your phone and the worldwide internet. And this is one thing that the Chinese government really doesn't want. They want to be able to control you. They want to be able for you to have a social credit rating. They want to track you with cameras everywhere, which they do already. And they want to know what you do on your phone all the time. Having a Starlink internet is going to be a big problem for them. At the same time, China has basically financed and built a factory for Tesla on their territory and given them access and preferential treatment to the biggest electric vehicle market in the world. Now, I guarantee you one thing: China will not look at SpaceX and Tesla as two separate entities. In their eyes, they're owned by the same person and it's the same thing. SpaceX, Tesla, no difference. So what they will want to do is they kind of have a hostage. They can take Tesla hostage to make sure that SpaceX doesn't allow Starlink terminals to work within China. Well, that's all fine and dandy until the US government says, well, SpaceX, we really want you to make sure that those terminals work, because that's how our propaganda goes through. That's how we can topple that regime. That's how we can have more minds on our side when it comes to Chinese riots, politics, civil unrest. That's how that starts. You have to have the information, something to fight for. If you don't, then you just keep on going the way it has been always. This Starlink service will present the same challenges to Iranian government, to North Korean government, and to any government that uses hardcore suppression of information to keep their citizens in line. Same with Russia. This is going to be one of the biggest problems for Starlink and for Elon Musk personally. Not so much for SpaceX, but for Tesla and Elon Musk. How does he balance both? Selling his electric cars in markets that don't want his other company to sell his service or even make sure it works. I'll be very curious to see how that plays out, because Elon Musk will be between a rock and a hard place. And I don't know how that's going to play out. We'll see, but I have a feeling that Tesla cars might stop being sold in 2030 in China more than satellites stop working over China, simply because SpaceX is a highly subsidized company, at least until now, from the United States government. And when I say that, I don't say it with anything negative. Until SpaceX, there hasn't been a company in the space industry that hasn't been highly subsidized anywhere in the world. SpaceX is the first one making it possible to where you don't have to be subsidized to have a viable business in space. So that's not dig at Tesla, but at the same time, it's an anchor for them to work with the US government and kind of follow what the US government wants them to follow. And if those are at odds with what the Chinese government wants them to follow, I have a feeling Tesla's factory and future sales in China around 2027 to 2030 might be becoming an issue. We'll see. There might be some kind of a solution that I can't think of right now, but it looks dicey. It looks very bright for Starlink and not so bright for Tesla. You might see NIO or XPeng taking over the Chinese factory in Tesla and producing Model 3s. That doesn't mean that Tesla will lose their edge. I come from a communist country. We used to make cars in the 1990s, or at least we used to drive cars in the 1990s that were designed in the 1950s and 60s in Italy and the United States. We weren't, trust me, we weren't gaining on you in any way, shape, or form, but it might happen. It might happen, and it's probably the more likely scenario to have, if you think that we currently have a Cold War, to have a colder war than what we have right now, because this is going to be a big issue. Having free internet in China is not something to mess with, and owing the US government is also not something to be messed with. So Elon Musk is going to be really between a rock and a hard place, and I can't wait to see how it plays out. I just think that Tesla is not going to be the winner in that situation. We'll see. Again, my name is Nasco. This is the Great Reset. I hope you enjoyed this. If you like, hit like. If you want to see more of my stuff, hit subscribe. And if you want to talk with me, I'm watching every comment right now.